take questions 1 to 7 together. The programme for government commits to establishing 4 citizens' assemblies on the topics of biodiversity loss, the type of directly elected mayor and local government structures best suited for Dublin, matters relating to drug use and the future of education. The Citizens' Assembly on Local Government in Dublin has concluded its work and submitted its report and recommendations to the Oireachtas in line with the Assembly's terms of reference. I met with the Chairman of the Assembly, Jim Gavin, last week, and he briefed me in detail on the work done. I want to take this opportunity in the House to thank him and all of those who took part in the Citizens' Assembly for their participation and commitment to the task. The Citizens' Assembly on Biodiversity held its final meeting on the 21st of January and will submit its report and recommendations to the Oireachtas and Government as soon as possible. 2 further Citizens' Assemblies are committed to in the programme for government, one on matters relating to drug use and another on the future of education. It will be a matter for the Oireachtas to agree the timeline and terms of reference for the next assemblies. I anticipate the government will very shortly discuss the question of the new Citizens' Assemblies and will bring forward a proposal on the matter to the House in the coming weeks.
Now, there are a number of speakers, so up to 1.5 minutes. I shocked them.
Oh my God, and apologies, I was over-eager. This is an important issue. I want to thank the Taoiseach for the information that you have provided thus far. And I also want to start by congratulating Minister Naughton on her appointment as the new Minister with responsibility for the National Drug Strategy. And last month, her predecessor, Frankie Fegan, reiterated the government's commitment to holding a Citizens' Assembly on drugs in early 2023, and in fact cited early in the new year. And last week, you also confirmed, Taoiseach, that you would bring forward a proposal in the coming weeks, but we need more than that now. What we need to hear is the timeline and a date on the establishment of the Citizens' Assembly. Taoiseach, it's almost 3 full years since your programme for government committed to holding this Citizens' Assembly, and we are still no closer to a definitive date. As you know, Taoiseach, the Justice Committee recently undertook research on the current legal position on possession, and I would hope that you can confirm today that the recommendations made in that report will inform the terms of reference of a Citizens' Assembly, and hopefully that work has begun. So Taoiseach, will you please lay out the timeline for the Citizens' Assembly on drugs to take place before the House today?
Dr. Gino Kenny.
Taoiseach, my question is the same. The programme for government stated that there would be a Citizens' Assembly in relation to drug use and the broader question of decriminalisation. And we've waited, but as of yet, there hasn't been a date, which is very disappointing. As I said, this issue has been gone on for decades, and the status quo is completely unacceptable. And it's unacceptable in the basis that as long as governments don't do anything in a positive way, people will die. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about people's lives. Because I believe if we had a different approach to drug use, there will be actually people still living today if we change that approach. And I think most people in this country have changed their opinion in relation to the status quo or even going backwards. I just firmly believe that the Irish public now are open to a different approach in relation to drug use. And wherever that recommendations the Citizens' Assembly give, I think it's imperative and it's important that the government put them recommendations into use. Because I just believe, Taoiseach, in this lifetime of this government, how long it takes, it has to, for the sake of people that are living today that will be dead, they have to change their status on the relation to the misuse of drug acts. It doesn't work.
Corda, and like the other deputies, Taoiseach, I would urge you to name a date and a chairperson for the Citizens' Assembly. Like you, I'd like to join in congratulating the chairs of the 2 previous bodies, because I suppose we have a Citizens' Assembly infrastructure. It has dealt with 2 issues, and we have 2 more to go. And so I can appreciate why it has taken some time to get here. There is a commitment in the programme for government. I think that's really positive. You both yourself and the previous Taoiseach have both committed to having it now in 2023, and I think that is very hopeful. I think what we need to do, Taoiseach, is along with the Citizens' Assembly to debate. We also need to have a civic society debate. We need to ensure that organisations like the Drugs Task Forces are funded so that they can have those conversations with communities that have been impacted by drugs, with communities that have not been impacted by drugs or believe that they have not been impacted by drugs, because we know drug use is across all of society. So I'd ask for the Minister of State to engage with the Drugs Task Forces to enable that civic society campaign in parallel to the Citizens' Assembly. And I would ask that broader society to start to have the discussion. If you haven't thought about the issue of drugs, if you haven't thought about how it impacts you and your community, then to start to have those discussions, because I think by doing that, we'll have an informed debate and not one based on moral judgments.
Taoiseach, there is a commitment in the programme for government to hold that Citizens' Assembly on drugs, and I very much welcome that. I'm conscious that the other Citizens' Assemblies are unfinished in biodiversity at this stage. Would you envisage that would have to be finished up before you'll be advancing into the other ones, or can they be running in parallel? I would hope that they could and that there wouldn't be any delay because you already had Dublin Mayor and biodiversity running in parallel. It's very important that Citizens' Assembly would get up and running as soon as possible. The conversations are already taking place right across the country in communities, at dinner tables, various. Had the opportunity to meet with so many different groups on it. Youth diversion programs, students, and a number of others on it. And I know that here inside that the Justice Committee have also been debating. I'd be interested to hear if you have a view on their deliberations on it as well.
Taoiseach, I was involved in organising, along with the Save Our Forests, Save Our Lands, Quailcha and this.
Thanks, that's Ken Corlin. Yeah, Taoiseach, I want to ask, are you going to listen to these Citizens' Assemblies when they report? I mean, we establish them, they make recommendations on the basis of the evidence that they hear. So, for example, in relation to the Citizens' Assembly on biodiversity, are you going to listen to them about the Gresham House deal? Are you going to listen to them?
Taoiseach, 2 months ago, the Labour Party brought forward a Dáil motion calling for a firm date to be set for convening a Citizens' Assembly on drugs. And we're looking for the date for the establishment of that assembly, and in particular that its terms of reference will ensure that it addresses the central issue of how we move away from a criminal justice approach to drug use and towards a health-led approach. And I would also ask, given that permission was finally granted over Christmas for a supervised injection facility at Merchants Quay in Dublin, we still see a clear need for other such facilities in other cities and urban areas. And can you confirm if there are plans for that, even on a mobile basis, to have supervised injection facilities available?
So I think the case for a Citizens' Assembly on drugs has been made for a very long time, and there is an urgency around it. So I support that. I wish that it could be brought forward more quickly than you have indicated, but I would appeal to you to stick to the commitment and the date is set out. Taoiseach, would you believe me if I told you that for the last year and a half, there has been no functioning drug and alcohol task force in Dublin's north inner city? Imagine that. Ground zero of the heroin epidemic back in the 1980s, still an area and neighbourhoods literally ravaged by intergenerational drug misuse, abuse, addiction, and all of the associated social phenomena with it. I've raised this for a year and a half. I raised it with Frankie Feehan when he was Minister. I raised it with the Taoiseach. I raised it with the Minister for Health. There has been a deliberate running down and disbandment of this drugs and alcohol task force in the north inner city of Dublin. A report has been drawn up by the outgoing minister. It has been submitted somewhere, Last Count Corla. I just want to appeal that that report is published, that the duly selected chair is appointed, and that body is allowed to go on with its work. I won't elaborate on the behaviour of the department and others in this fiasco. I would just appeal that it's brought to an end.
Taoiseach, we need the Citizens' Assembly on drugs to happen as soon as possible. Look, what we're looking at is absolute failure if we're talking about drug use, if we're talking about drug addiction, if we're talking about the services that relate to those problems, if we're talking about drug criminality, if we're talking about drug debt intimidation, and the impact this has across society, but it's particularly bad in working class areas, particularly in urban settings. So we really need to do something different. We've all said the war on drugs has failed, so we need to try something different. We need this assembly to be up and running, and then we need to make sure that we have the services, that we have the interventions, and that we try something different, because what we're doing is not working, and we are failing multiple people. Many people are dying, and I do not see anything hopeful other than we actually listen to what a Citizens' Assembly says, and we actually act upon it.
Thanks very much, Deputies, for your contributions. I anticipate the government will consider the question of the next Citizens' Assemblies in the very near future. Once that decision has been taken, we'll promptly bring forward a proposal to the House for debate and resolution. Subject to the timely passage of the resolution, my expectation is the next Citizens' Assemblies could commence as early as April or May, and should then be in a position to report back to the House before the end of the year. The government is committed to fulfilling the programme for government commitment to establish new citizens' assemblies on matters relating to drug use and the future of education. As I said, we're very keen to have it up and running before the summer recess. I can confirm that the work of the Justice Committee will inform the terms of reference, as will earlier work carried out by former Justice Garrett Sheehan's group and the Justice Committee previously under David Stanton's chairmanship. And it will look at issues in the round, and decriminalisation can be part of that. The two citizens' assemblies in 2022 were run in parallel, so that is possible. However, the clear advice from the chairpersons of both assemblies, as well as the independent evaluators, is that future assemblies should be run sequentially rather than concurrently. That's the best way to give each assembly the necessary space and time to undertake its deliberations without undue constraints. In response to Deputy's questions, we are of course going to listen to what the citizens' assemblies have to say. I think it's fair to say we did in relation to marriage equality, on the 8th Amendment, on the climate law, but listening to what they say doesn't necessarily mean adopting every recommendation, lock, stock and barrel. And in relation to the Irish Strategic Forestry Fund, I do think there is some misunderstanding or misinformation here. There's no state-owned land involved, no public land that's being privatised. It is already privately owned land, and most of it is under forest already. And we do need forests for lots of reasons. Yes, of course, we need them as a climate sink. We need them for biodiversity. We need them for leisure. But we do also need forests for timber. And that's where spruce and conifers are the most useful, because we want to move away from using concrete and steel in favour of timber, and that's why there is room for different types of forestry. Oh, sorry, just on the issue in relation to the North Inner City Drugs and Alcohol Task Force, I will take that up with Minister Naughton. She's new in her role, but I'll make sure she's aware of it and that progress is made on it.